Okay.
Welcome everybody to Uncovering Midrash. Sorry for the change of title from when you received in the email. I switched to Centrality of Sinai because it turns out that the Divine Law one is primarily actually on Mishpatim, because there's only like 5 laws mentioned at the end of this week's Parsha, but there's a lot more mentioned next week. So the part of the Midrash is actually next week's Parsha. So I switched it to this Midrash instead about Matan Torah. Hopefully the Midrash will make sense. Hopefully we'll find it fulfilling. So here we go. Okay, so we're discussing some of the Midrash. One part, again, there's a lot of Midrash as well as confusion as to how to interpret what exactly happened at Har Sinai. But we're going to be focusing on the centrality of it to the belief of the Jewish people and prophecy in general. Okay, so first things first, let's take a brief look at the Ten Commandments, or some of them, because I couldn't fit them all on one page. So here's the first 2/3, depending on how you count. Okay, so here we are in the 20th chapter. Okay, so first we have God begins to speak, and then so the breakdown we have here is not with Tamei El. I mean, there's both Tamei Elyon and regular Tamim there on the Hebrew side, but let's look at the English. So you see here, right? So it seems like there's nothing. It doesn't seem to stand out so much. The Ten Commandments anything particularly special. The Ten Commandments themselves, right? So the question is, right? So there's Ten Commandments. I am God. Right? God is saying who he is, and then we have him saying he's going to take them out. So don't make any idols and don't bow down to any foreign powers. Right? Fairly straightforward. But as far as the role that it later takes on, there isn't necessarily any indication of this as of this point when we first look at the Psukim. But the Midrash connects to other mentionings of Matan Torah, and we'll see how that works out, right? So it's focusing on Vaydaber Elokim et kol advarim ha'ela lemor. God spoke all these words saying. The question is, why is it necessary to have that leading in to the rest of this parsha, next week's parsha? What do we need to have say that God spoke all of these words saying? So one option is that, well, because to prove that it's actually God and not that Moshe made it up, but but the Midrash is not satisfied with just that being the answer. It's got to be a little bit deeper. But to that effect, here's the Midrash Rabbah, 28:6. The question is, why do you need to have the words kol hadvarim ha'ela, all of these things? I'll read it, and then we'll discuss it a little bit. So Rabbi Yitzchak said, what the prophets were to prophesy in the future in each generation, they received from Mount Sinai. Moshe said to Israel, but those who are staying with us today, and with those not here with us today, does not say that with us standing today, but rather with us today. That these are the souls that will be created in the future who do not have substance, of whom standing is not mentioned. For even if they did not exist at that time, each one received that which was his. So this may be more popularized for people in terms of saw you at Sinai, the online dating service you may have heard of. But the point is that every Jew who would ever live, their soul was at Matan Torah. So if every single Jew's soul was at Matan Torah, so that also means that not only is the prophecy there, not only are their souls there, but also the prophecy is going to be there as well. So, and that's why when Moshe is retelling the story to Bnei Israel, and this is not the actual. This is actually still the context of Hazina, not the context of when Moshe is repeating the Ten Commandments, but he's saying that it's so they're linking to that in the story of Hazinu, Moshe's final speech, or that of Har Sinai, that everybody heard it and everybody had the opportunity to be there, even if they didn't currently exist yet. So we're going to focus more on each of the prophets were prophesied the future generations. Okay, so the point of the question is, why does it say et kol ha'dvarim? It means that not just these words, but actually all the words of every prophet moving forward is also included in Har Sinai, which makes a lot of sense if you're thinking of the philosophical realm. One of the tenements of Jewish faith is that Har Sinai happened. Without it, Judaism kind of falls apart. So by kind of, I mean, according to everybody, it falls apart, right? So you can always debate, like here. So the game you should never play is what did this or did this not happen in Jewish history, and was this real or not real? It's a good way to not believe in God. But according to everybody, if you play this game, if you knock out, according to everybody, every opinion that I've ever seen, if you knock out Har Sinai, well, then Judaism is definitely will not function afterwards. But don't play that game. Right, we generally believe in in whatever they currently believe in for issue on that. Not my forte. If you'd like more books on philosophy of what you need to believe in or not, I'll send you to some, but that's not for now. Basically, we're focusing on how central Har Sinai is to Jewish belief, and also to the functioning of prophets in general. Okay, so now let's head over. So that's the first section, right? All the prophets. Now, okay, so fair, because without Har Sinai, the rest don't exist. But there's a lot more to the Midrash as well. So the Midrash continues on. If anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in at any point, and I'm happy to answer them if anything's unclear. Okay, so now next prophet we jump to is Malachi. So anybody know why we're jumping all the way to Malachi? Any guesses? Let me try a different question. How many prophets are in between Moshe Rabbeinu and Malachi?
Malachi is Malachi the last prophet in the.
Correct. Malachi is the last prophet. So we went from one of the first prophets we have for the Jewish people to the last one. So like even Malachi, who is the last prophet to speak the word of God, yes, that means that Muhammad is not a prophet, neither is Jesus. They are not prophets. They are false messiahs and for more on what happens to them, please see the Parsha of both of Navi Sheker and of see Navi Sheker and what their punishment is. Anyways, so Malachi is the last prophet. So what does it say? So now we're looking at the first pasuk of Malachi's first prophecy. Okay, so the question is, so how do we connect between Malachi and the rest of prophecy? So here we go. So this English translation is from Svaria. So again, it's pretty solid. It explains the grammar of it. Again, some of these are Hebrew puns, but it should hopefully be clear enough. So who here would like to learn more about Malachi and enlighten us with the last prophet?
Okay, Chaim, you want me to read?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry, I just sat down again. Okay, where am I reading from?
And so too.
The top? Midrash?
Yeah.
And so too it states the burden that God spoke to Israel by in the hand of Malachi. It does not state in the days of Malachi, but rather in the hand of Malachi, as the prophecy was already in his hand from Mount Sinai, but until that time he was not given permission to prophesy.
Right. So what does that mean? How are we reading his name Malachi as? It means my messenger.
Oh, Malachi.
Right. It was given to the hand of my messenger, i.e. in the hands of the prophets, until it was eventually disseminated later on. So all prophecies technically existed. So how on earth could that work? Any ideas? Like, how could all prophecies have been given prior? Because prophecies often rely on future events or on past choices involved. So, does this mean literally that every prophecy was given to Moshe, or was somehow extended in the world before Moshe, or does it mean something else? What do we think?
I think it's like a dormant, like a sleeper cell, and they just know it afterwards.
All right. So, right. So the truth is there, just it's not yet interpreted. It's kind of like floating amorphously. And then once the prophet sees it, then it becomes reality. That's one option. Another option is just it's not that it's literally there, rather that without the original prophet, i.e., without Moshe, the rest of the prophecies don't have any substance and they kind of disappear.
Okay.
So those are the two ways that I can think of reading this. Any other ideas? All right. That's what we got. That's what we got. All right. Okay, now let's go to the next section. So now we spoke about Malachi. So don't worry, we're gonna get to some other prophets that are a little more familiar. Okay, so next up we have is Yeshayahu. Okay, so now this is from Yeshayahu, smacked, towards the second half, actually last quarter of his prophecies. So now we're going to be quoting two parts of a pasuk, and then and splitting it up in order to prove that the connection between all prophecy and Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay. I'll read this one. Okay, so likewise, Yeshayahu said that what does the pasuk say? Me'et heotam sham ani. From that time was I there. So Yeshayahu said, from the time that the Torah was given at Sinai, I was there and received this prophecy. Except, when does it come to Vek? V'ata Hashem Elokim shlachani v'rucho ad achshav onitan lo reshut lihit nabot. So this supports what my mom said, that all prophecies were there, right? God had already bestowed the spirit and the ability to prophesy. Just people weren't allowed to open their mouths and say the prophecy was yet. The prophecy was already there, and until now, it was not. You couldn't open his mouth. It's not that the prophecy wasn't there. Just God has to let you prophesy. You can't just decide to prophesy without God saying so, or that's not a prophecy. That's just you're making stuff up. Okay, so it's not necessarily what it meant in context, but it does fit in well with the ideas we've been quoting so far the Malachi as well, where again we're reinterpreting the use of words to point towards the centrality and the connection of all nevuot to Har Sinai. Okay. Next we have. So now we're moving on for prophets. Okay, so we spoke about the prophets until now. Now we're moving on to the Chachamim. Okay, so it's not only the prophets who have the weight of their words are dependent upon Har Sinai. Rather, it's also the Chachamim, Chazal, right, and Mishnah, Gemara, etc. also are rely upon it in order to exist. So, who would like to read a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll read. And it was not only of the prophets who received their prophecy from Sinai, but also the sages who arise in each generation. Each of them received what was his from Sinai. And so too it states, these things did the Lord speak to your entire congregation.
Okay, so this is actually a quotation from the second iteration of Sarah Dibra, when Moshe is repeating it to the descendants of those who heard it the first time 40 years later. So this is how Moshe introduces it. And so it's not so it doesn't quite, again, not literally what it meant in that case. It was not Moshe trying to say that here's the strength of the Chachamim, but again, it has a similar idea that seemingly we have the wisdom of the Chachamim is parallel to the nevuah of the prophets. right? So that means so there's pretty much direct parallel of the Midrash, drawing to the two of them. So why is that necessary?
Wait, can you repeat why is what necessary?
Why is it beneficial to see that? Here, this is here. I see Shmuel came back. Okay, so just want to give a. So basically, we're discussing why at Har Sinai it has the extra words of et kol dvarim ha'elach. Right? Why is it that God spoke all of these things? Like, why did that need to be stated? All of these things. So first, we went through talking about how each of the how that's used as a so that all the prophecies that we got were actually already given at Har Sinai. What does that mean technically? That's a separate, like, so we said either that meant that they were extant in the world but not yet actualized, or that the rest of the prophecies don't, without Mount Har Sinai, a lot of prophecy kind of falls apart. So now we're talking, and so now we discussed that as it relates to Malachi and as it relates to Yeshayahu, and now we're at how it applies to the Chachamim as well, to Chazal, and how our, Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha, how all of it also ties right on back to Mount Har Sinai, and it was all given by God. So what does it mean that when we say that all of the that every Chacham received what is his from Har Sinai? What does that mean? What do we think? What could that possibly mean? Does this mean that? Let me give an example. Does this mean that every chiddush that anybody comes up nowadays, Moshe Rabbeinu also knew? Or does it mean that it's all, connected to Moshe Rabbeinu?
I would think it's all connected.
Correct. I would agree with the same.
But I would think that part of the reason that, maybe you said this already in a different way, just part of the reason that all these things have to connect back to Moshe, back to Mount Har Sinai, is that then they're valid. If somebody comes along later on and he claims that it's from God, and maybe, this is sort of like a way of validating all those later nevuos, that they really came from the source.
Correct. So ironically, not only does Judaism make claim to Mount Har Sinai, so too does Christianity and Islam. So
there you go.
Make things a little complicated. But we'll leave that aside. That's why there are laws of Navi Sheker, so who is actually continuing on the chain of prophecy and who is a false prophet who's deserving of death. So when we are here, right, so it'd be hard to say that everything that every chacham would ever say that Moshe Rabbeinu heard, because for instance, there's another midrash which I didn't bring it in front of you. I'll say it outside, where Moshe, is writing down the Torah, and then God says, tells him to write the crowns. And so Moshe's asked God, well, why am I writing all these crowns? Right here, look at the Torah inside. There are all these little crowns on top. So what's going on with those crowns? Why are they there? So God says, Moshe, they're there because someday Rabbi Akiva is going to be Dorish them. Okay, there's another similar Gemara which says that Moshe Rabbeinu says, if that's really the continuation of that story, that if that really happens, so let me go see. So Moshe goes and sees the BAYT Midrash of Rabbi Akiva. And he sits there and he has no idea what's going on. Right? The manner of style of teaching, he's very confused. And he's like, and they're talking about halacha, and he's like, and it just doesn't sound familiar to him. And finally, what satisfies Moshe at the end? That they say that this halacha is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So the question is, how does that work? Because, if that means Moshe already knew it, so why was he waiting for that? And how does that relate to being his confusion the rest of the time? So the Midrash doesn't answer that, but the various commentators there do question the story. As I'm saying, that the answer is because it's not that he remembered that he was taught already. No, the point is that he realizes that it's all part of the chain that goes back to what Moshe had taught. That everything that you see later is all connected back to the original source. Not that it is that we're simply repeating and reiterating the exact same thing for the last several thousand years, but that everything that we're learning and that we're doing is all connected back to the true, authentic source. Okay. And because if that's the difference between that's why Judaism is true as opposed to simply being an interesting afterthought. Okay. Now the next section we have in the same Midrash is moving on from the centrality of Har Sinai, talks about the what God's voice was like at Har Sinai. Okay, so this is actually a continuation of the pasuk we quoted last time. Dvarim Heyutet there. Right, this is the last time when right, like this Lord's will enter your congregation and said it with a great voice that did not cease. Kol gadol v'lo yasaf. The question is, what on earth is, or sorry, that's not necessarily the right turn of phrase. What do we mean when we say that God had a voice that did not stop? Or kol gadol v'lo yasaf. What on earth is that? What can that mean? Can't say what on earth because that would imply that God is actually of this earth, which in itself is another fun philosophical discussion. Again, I apologize for opening up a lot of cans of worms. If I don't close them properly, please ask me afterwards for a for a can cover. Okay, so now the question. So we're going to discuss. Yes.
I was just laughing. No.
Okay. All right. So now in terms of what happened at Har Sinai, so as we'll read it as we read it in the intro, is that we see that so basically we see that the Jews end up seeing the sounds. So the question is, what on earth is going on with the special nature of the voice of God as well as the sound surrounding it, and what did they see? So here are some options offered by the Midrash. So hopefully, you'll see why this Midrash is attached to the previous one based on when you see Rish Lakish's opinion. Okay, so what does Kol Gadol V'lo Yasaf mean? So first we have Rabbi Yochanan. So who wants to be? So we're going to. So we have three opinions. So I need three readers. Okay, so who wants to be? So there's Rabbi Yochanan, Rish Lakish, and then Chachamim.
I'll be Rabbi Yochanan.
Okay, I'll be Rish Lakish.
Am I Chachamim or another volunteer? Okay, I guess I'll be Chachamim. I'll be the Chachamim then. Or the Rabbanan. Okay, go for it.
Okay, Rabbi Yochanan said, one voice was split into 7 voices, and they were divided into 70 languages.
Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, from it prophesied all the prophets who arose.
Okay, the sages said that it did not have an echo. So which one of these do we like the best? Or do we feel fits the best with the Psukim? Or is most impressive?
Right.
So I would say as far as the most impressive, the least impressive would be that of the Rabbanan, which says that it did not have an echo. Because that's like, it's Shelo Hayala Batko. Because that's just not as, earth shaking as like, oh, the really loud voice didn't echo. It's like, not quite as, breaking of the senses and of everything as other ones are. As opposed to, Rabbi Yochanan says, is one voice. And when it says the lo yasaf, it doesn't mean that, it didn't cease. It means that it was, uncountable. Meaning that it was divided into, 7 voices that were then into 70 languages. Yet to have all of that, and yet, if you thought the miracle of Shomer Zach or B'dibar Echad is impressive, try doing that times 490. Okay, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan is saying was what it meant by Kol Gadol. For the first two, when the Jews heard directly from God the Aseret Abraham. Okay, about Rish Lakish, what's he saying?
He's saying like what you were saying before, that all the prophets who prophesied had either heard it or had it in their heads from being prophets.
Correct, right? So the prophets simply, right? So Kol Gadol V'lo Yasaf is that this is the source and the sound of prophecy, and it just did not stop, right? So this initial sound of God's word coming, is what every other prophet then drew upon moving forward.
Rabbi Yochanan's statement doesn't make any sense to me, because this was given just to one nation. It wasn't given to the 70 nations. So why would it be split into 70 languages if it was only given to one nation, Bnei Israel?
So it's because excellent question. So one option is that the Torah is not just meant for the Jewish people. It's meant for all 70 nations, right? 70 is is what you call a so-called not magic number. It doesn't necessarily mean literally, but it would, like we say, there's 70 nations of the world. It's not there's only 70, no more. No, 70 means all of them, right? It's kind of like saying, many or infinity. Just because you can't quantify it doesn't mean it doesn't have meaning. So here too. So when you said that it's split 70 into 70 languages, it means that it's understandable and intended for every single person of every single nation of every single tongue. Has the Torah is meant for them, or can be meant for them, if assuming they come to believe in it. So that'd be why. Not to say that it wasn't heard in the language that the Jews understood, meaning that of Hebrew, but that it also has elements of all of the 70 languages, so that everybody, all types of the world, are actually all a part of it as well. And also, let's say, the degree of understanding that we don't necessarily know. There was, let's say, the Erev Rav who converted who converted in Egypt, so we don't know what languages they spoke. For all we know, they only, they didn't speak Hebrew. They probably did, but maybe they heard. Maybe for them, they had added meaning based on the other 70 languages. Yes.
I'm just thinking the only thing that pops in my head with 70 languages is the Sanhedrin.
Right. Sanhedrin needed also 70 people needed to know every language, all 70 languages, because if they didn't know all the 70 languages, they would not be able to properly understand a given court case. Because once things get in translation, then you always lose some of the meaning. So here it's saying that that you could never lose that. Theoretically, Torah should be able to be translated into every language without losing its character. But the only one who can actually properly do that is God. Generally, when people translate, I know we're using English translation here, but there is often a lot of things that are lost and missed. Similar, let's say, look, we're reading this now, we're trying to figure out what was the original Midrash that was said by by the Chachamim here. So when you look at the English, did not cease. It's like, okay, well then I don't know how you get from great voice, did not cease to the rest of the Midrashim. But if you look at the original Hebrew, it makes a lot of sense, because Kol Gadol, the great voice, right? But then Gadol could also mean large and imposing. And Lo Yasaf can also mean not just doesn't cease, but it can also mean never ending. It can also mean you can interpret it as being other things as well. Does that answer your question, Nathan?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, excellent question. Right. So is it right? So that's the real thought. Is that again? I'm still not sure about what the Chachamim's point was, but again, they say V'lo Yasaf, is that because it didn't it did. I mean, when we say that did not stop, meant that it kept going on without ever echoing back. But again, not quite as interesting as the other two, in my opinion. But again, I think because again, Rish Lakish connects very well to what we just said previously, and Rabbi Yochanan has a very interesting approach. Yes.
Question? I wonder if their point of said does not have an echo is that it was a pure voice as opposed to an echo.
Could be.
Now the voice itself kept on going, but it didn't have an echo. So it wasn't that the voice was coming back on itself, is that just kept on going.
Right. Definitely possible. Right. That was, yeah. Right. Because also if you heard the echo, right.
In my Kuzari class with Rabbi Karobkin, he mentioned that one opinion is that people heard the voice in their heads. They didn't really hear it like we normally hear it, but it was a voice in their heads. Have you heard that before?
I have not. But it means that when all the Jews heard is from when they heard Har Sinai, it wasn't through their ears; it was directly implanted into their brains.
Right.
Like a Vulcan mind meld.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's also the concept that God doesn't talk. He's not like a human. I mean,
Right. So that's it. So what happens exactly with with Mount Har Sinai is a very large machloket amongst the commentators. So for instance, typically Onkelos, whenever we something that implies that God revealed himself, like speak. So instead it says that God was revealed to the world. Not that God is speaking, right, or God is seen, rather that God, we notice God, or God allows us to notice his presence. And the Ramban then goes into this very long Kabbalistic, again, on our Parsha. I remember this because I remember reading. I remember going over this, right around Super Bowl time, because that's when Yitzhak comes up. Had to cover the Ramban. While we're waiting for the game to get going, we had to cover that. So the question is, how do you deal with the physicality of God? Is it possible? Is it not possible? And or would you say that the says that this is the one time when God actually physically, whatever that means, appeared in the world? Yeah, no other time. This was the one time, and the result of of God's manifestation. Again, whatever that means. Long discussion and how that could work. Rama would say that's possible. Rama would say, of course, it is possible, and for that, we'll have to leave that for another time. But at the end of the day, what does that mean by manifestation? How would that have worked, and how did that relate to the field? But whether it happened or didn't happen and went straight to the brains or not, it definitely was impressive as well as scary enough that the Jews begged for it not to happen ever again because it broke them. So what part of it was what broke them? Depends on what you think happened. But whatever it was, however impressive God's voice was, or God's revealing himself, or God's prophesying everybody all at once, it seems to have, according to the Midrash, it definitely seems to have broken the Jews down. They just give again. They say they want Moshe to tell them not to hear from God anymore. The reason for why, insert what happened there. Okay. All right. Okay. Now the last section we have is we're building off of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion in terms of the otherworldly nature of God's voice. Okay, so this is going to might be a little dense, but hopefully we'll be able to get through it. Okay, so Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani said of Rabbi Yochanan, what is the meaning of the voice of the Lord is in strength? That's Kol Shem B'Koach, right? We say it every Shabbos, both Bar Kolat Shabbat, as well as we put the Torah back. So Kol Shem B'Koach, right? God's voice is strength. So Efshel Amar came. So how is that possible that you can describe God's voice that way? Switch back here. My apologies. Right. So can one really say this? Isn't it true that even one angel, no creature, can stand up to God's voice, as it states in Daniel? So this is Daniel when he's having his quasi-nevuah prophetic dream, describing the angel as his body was like beryl or tarshish, and the voice of its words like the voice of the multitude. This is an angel, not even God. So right. So that's Daniel looking at an angel. Again, for more on that, again, I gave a sheer week and a half ago on angels. I did not quite address the point on Daniel and Daniel's dreams of the angel and how the whole thing plays out. For that, I will hopefully get there at some point. I give a if you can share just on that, please let me know, and I'll be happy to give it at a later date. Okay. But again, so that's the description of the angel like that. Okay. So again, not God, but the angel. That's how Daniel describes the angel. Again, we mentioned in the angel share that basically human beings' perception of angels and anything divine is limited. And so this is the extent that Daniel will understand was these physical characteristics of regards to an angel, because angels aren't necessarily corporeal. So, and now we're comparing. Now we're going to say, if that's an angel, now we're going to instead show how great God is comparatively to an angel. So this is message from Yirmiyahu, that hello at the Shemayim va'aretz ani malay. So God's saying that God's speaking to Yirmiyahu to tell Bnei Israel. Basically, Bnei Israel have been not listening for the umpteenth time, and he is trying to get them to, and like reminding them, that God is who God is, and not to keep ignoring him. So God says, do I not fill the heavens and the earth? So if God fills up the entire heavens and the earth, again, how does that work physically? Again, I'll discuss that a little bit. The point is that God is all powerful. So does he really need to speak? Does he really need to speak in strength? Rather, what do we mean by kol Hashem b'koach? That God, the voice of the Lord, is in strength. It means it's the strength of all voices. And this verse supports the view of Rabbi Yochanan. The Lord gives the word. The nows are a great host, or a great multitude, or a great army. So this thing that basically God's voice encapsulates all voices all in one. So when we said that 70 voices, it means that basically every sound you could possibly think of or make combined together would be God's voice, because God's voice is a combination of every sound that exists in the world. Which is, again, what does that mean for our limited eardrums to understand? I have no idea. But again, the point being, I'm sure if I were to have heard it, I would no longer have any eardrums, so I would not be able to tell you what I heard either. But the point being is that that's the unique nature of God's voice, is it's just that much beyond the normal and the reality. And as far as I just wanted to make a point of how God could fill up the whole world and not. So for more on that, please look at the concept of the Hasidic concept of Tzimtzum and how God removed himself from the world when he created the world, which is again a much larger discussion on Chassidut. Which, for more on that, please join Rabbi Karakin on Thursday nights when he for his Chassidut cheer. If you really want to know more about that topic, particularly, I'd say ask Rabbi Karakin nicely. Maybe he'll discuss at some point, because he's definitely far more qualified to discuss those issues than I am. Okay. Yeah. So just let's wrap up, and then afterwards, we answer the questions. Feel free. So I'm going to run through the slides and start from the beginning. So again, this all started based on the fact that at Har Sinai, there's a seemingly extra phrase of Kol Hadorim Eila, that God spoke all of these words. The question is, why does he need all these words? And then the Midrash says that all of these words imply that every prophecy going on forward is also based in the word based from Har Sinai. We said that could either mean that literally every prophecy was given at Har Sinai, and then maybe that it continued in some, like, it was not yet fulfilled sense, but it was latent and waiting until a prophet could take it, bring it into reality. The other option being, way of interpreting it, is that all future prophecy doesn't have much any leg to stand on without Har Sinai. And then we discussed how this relates to Malachi, meaning how Malachi's prophecies are also based on the fact of Har Sinai. We said the same thing about Yeshayahu as well, based on the drasha there. And then we moved on, to saying how that similarly all the drashot of Chachamim also connect back to Har Sinai as well, and that all the Mishnah, Gemara, etc., would be nowhere if not for the fact that Har Sinai occurred. Then lastly, we're trying to discuss what God's voice means. We gave one is that there's Rabbi Yochanan, which is the very fantastic version of it, which just basically trying to describe that God's voice is is a way of describing the impossible nature of God's voice, and that doesn't really make much physical sense. Again, which is little confusing, and Nathan had an excellent question regarding that. Then we had Rosh Galakish, who connects it back to the previous discussion we had before about how it's all related to prophecy. And lastly, we had the Chachamim, who said that it was based on the lack of echo. And then we had a more fleshing out of Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, quoted by Rosh Hashanah, where we discussed a little bit more about what the miraculous nature of God's voice was. Okay. Any questions, anybody? All right. So I'm going to end the recording here. I wish everybody a good week. Just reminding everybody that on Wednesday night I will be discussing demons. It will be posted in the announcements and the daily email. And if you can't find it, please feel free to email me. cmetzger@torontotorah.com.